Good morning. There shall now be an opportunity for silent prayer or meditation. Thank you. You may be seated. I'd like to welcome our guests in the galleries. I would like to welcome our guests in the galleries, and you're most welcome, and thank you for being here this morning. We just need to inform you that you are not, according to our rules, you may not participate in the debate, so you cannot clap, you cannot whistle, cannot stand and jump, but you can smile, that's all. So you're not supposed to participate, but you're most welcome, and thank you very much for being here. The Secretary will now read the order.
Debate on vote number 7, National Treasury Appropriation Bill.
I now call upon the Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Chairperson. My apologies for not observing protocol properly. I am still new in Parliament. Chairperson and honorable members, it is my singular honor to present the budget vote of the National Treasury. National Treasury is the custodian of the long-term prosperity of South Africa, a mandate it derives from none other than the supreme law of the land, the Constitution. This mandate is further fleshed out in the Public Finance Management Act, the PFMA. The Constitution calls for the establishment of a national treasury to ensure transparency, accountability, sound financial controls in the management of the country's public finances. The PFMA expands on this, mandating the National Treasury to promote national government's fiscal policy and the coordination of macroeconomic policy, to ensure the stability and soundness of the financial system and financial services, to coordinate intergovernmental and fiscal relations, to manage the budget preparation process, and to enforce transparency and effective management of the revenue and expenditure, assets and liabilities, public entities, and constitutional institutions. Our President Cyril Ramaphosa, in his State of the Nation address, called on all of us to engage or to encourage significant new investment in our economy to create jobs, reduce poverty and inequality, and to transform the economy. The best way we can respond to President Ramaphosa's call is to remain true to our mandate and to do so without fear, favor, or prejudice. Our single most important contribution is to a more prosperous South Africa is to ensure fiscal sustainability, which together with sound monetary policy implemented by an independent central bank forms the bedrock of confidence in our economy, allowing our citizens, business, and households to make plans for and invest in the future. We must strengthen our fiscal resilience. While faster economic growth will ease the revenue pressures, we must not waver in our commitment to continue with spending reforms across all spheres of government. We must pursue with a greater sense of agency the governance and financial reforms aimed at restoring financial health of our state-owned entities. We need to rebuild confidence and trust that government and our public entities exist to serve the people of South Africa, and that they strive to do so effectively, efficiently, and honestly. National Treasury is supporting transformation through the Preferential Procurement Policy Framework, the Triple PFA, and its regulations, which increases aggregate demand of locally manufactured products, enhances competitiveness in the domestic market, and supports growth and job creation through the use of local content designation, transversal contracts, and set aside for small, medium enterprises. We are hosting the Financial Sector Summit this year to boost transformation in the sector and its role in supporting transformation in the economy more broadly. The budget deficit of the financial year 2017-18 is expected to be marginally narrower than was projected when we tabled the budget in February. Lower than expected spending outcomes mean that the expenditure ceiling has not been breached, despite the 16.2 billion of additions to non-interest spending in 2017-18. Government remains committed to the central adjustment to the fiscal framework announced in February this year. The outlook for tax revenue collection remains unchanged for now. The revenue measures, including the increase in VAT from 14 to 15% introduced in February, have now taken effect. May I take this opportunity to thank fellow South Africans who have continued to pay their taxes. I'm also grateful to the staff of the South African Revenue Services. Go ahead, it's important because you... we'll also the staff at SARS and the acting commissioner for all their hard work during the most trying of times. Any tax revenue collection agency, ladies and gentlemen, like Caesar's wife, must be above suspicion. The next major step, therefore, towards strengthening public finances is to restore public confidence in SARS. And in this regard, as we know, President Ramaphosa is finalizing the appointment of the Commission of Inquiry into SARS. We've also established an independent panel of experts to review the list of the 19 zero-rated food products and consider how best for government to mitigate the impact of the VAT increase on poor and indigent households. I've also requested the panel to consider whether key poverty alleviating expenditure programs like school nutrition program might be better at supporting the vulnerable. The panel is expected to submit an initial set of proposals to me by the end of June this year. We will continue to engage all relevant stakeholders to ensure that VAT increase will not have an adverse impact on poor and indigent households. Government must deliver more services with less. In this regard, the Office of the Chief Procurement Officer is assisting by targeting efforts in strategic procurement in two of the most critical areas for service delivery, health and education. Belt tightening is indeed a difficult exercise, and it is a challenge for all countries to safeguard investment spending while keeping compensation budgets in check. In response to this, Cabinet directed National Treasury, the Presidential Infrastructure Coordinating Committee Secretariat, and the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation to jointly arrange and establish the Budget Facility for Infrastructure, the BFI. This facility is intended to improve the quality of planning and management of large infrastructure projects. As part of this reform, government is considering mechanisms to bringing in private sector finance. The second phase of the BFI has been launched, and projects flowing from the BFI will be considered as part of the 2019-20 budget process. The February budget set aside 6 billion rands for drought relief and public infrastructure, some of which may be allocated towards projects that have complied with the BFI requirements. National Treasury continues to monitor department's implementation of human resource budget plans so that the expenditure ceilings on compensation budgets set out in the 2018 budget are adhered to. The wage negotiations are being finalized. Therefore, moving forward, we'll have to ensure that the spending choices we make continue to contribute to the improvement of the lives of all South Africans. National Treasury allocates grants and provides oversight of the financial management of both municipalities and provinces, who are at the coal face of service delivery in South African households and businesses. Here, our primary focus has been on ensuring sound financial management and supporting efforts to improve service delivery, given existing weaknesses in capacity and governance failures. For example, national and provincial treasuries have been coordinating a series of expenditure reviews through the Government Technical Advisory Center, our GTEC, to help provincial finance MECs pinpoint areas of improved efficiency. These results can now be used by departments to improve performance of various programs by line departments, particularly in health. A new grant will be introduced in the 2019 MTEF to support turnaround strategies in municipalities which have been poor performers but who demonstrate a commitment to implementing the necessary reforms to turn themselves around. Since our cities finance most of their budgets from their own revenue, national government is committed to further strengthening their ability to raise additional funding. This is a precondition if they are to be able to invest in the infrastructure needed to overcome the spatial inequalities of apartheid and ensure true transformation. This year, we will table an amendment to the Municipal Fiscal Powers and Functions Act to allow for improved regulation of development charges. We are also reviewing our policy on municipal borrowing to support responsible borrowing for long-term infrastructure investment by credit-worthy municipalities. Financial solutions alone, ladies and gentlemen, however, they cannot compensate for those municipal councils that allow corruption, mismanagement, and service delivery to falter. To ensure better accountability and strengthen financial oversight of municipalities, National Treasury and Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs have signed a memorandum of understanding to clarify their roles and responsibilities. Monitoring, oversight, support, and reporting on audit outcomes for municipalities now resides with the National Treasury and provincial treasuries. Efforts to raise capacity and ensure legal alignment are currently being undertaken. As a guardian of the national purse, National Treasury has a critical role to play in enforcing ethical behavior. National Treasury will therefore continue to support the Commission of Inquiry into State Capture in its endeavor to determine the extent and nature of the plundering of state resources and to contribute to rebuilding trust in state-owned entities. We provide advisory services to law enforcement agencies such as the National Prosecuting Authority and the South African Police Service in the investigation of complex commercial crime cases. Our world-class financial sector requires that South Africa remains at the forefront of fighting financing crime. The Financial Intelligence Center continues to implement key reforms to combat illicit financial flows, thanks to the measures introduced in the FIC Amendment Act. Government procurement of goods and services stood at approximately 900 billion rands in 2017/18. The Office of the Chief Procurement Officer ensures that not only is this expenditure directed to support empowerment, but that it is spent legally. The implementation of the Electronic Central Supplier Database has made it possible to identify and expose state employees who are conducting business with government. We urge organs of state to utilize the Central Supplier Database to verify whether any of their state employees are involved in tenders prior to making awards. To strengthen the sanction of companies that break the law, National Treasury has increased collaboration with law enforcement agencies. This includes collaboration with competition authorities to ensure that any companies found guilty of anti-competitive practices are restricted from doing business with government going forward. The Office of the Chief Procurement Officer will continue to use technological innovations to modernize supply chain management, to raise transparency, and to reduce the cost of doing business with the state. It also continues to find improvements in our existing guidelines and practices. The management of deviations and expansions is being reviewed to eliminate so-called evergreen contracts and reduce barriers to entry for new firms. National Treasury is currently rolling out the strategic procurement framework that provides for a differentiated procurement approach for different commodities, including infrastructure procurement and other cost containment measures. National Treasury is continuing to monitor late payments and expects executive authorities to take appropriate actions when people are paid beyond the 30-day limit. Efforts to replace aging and fragmented financial supply chain and human resource management systems include the IFMS, which is the Integrated Financial Management System, which has had challenges in the past, but it is going to be delivered, it is being delivered jointly between the National Treasury and the Department of Public Service and Administration and State Information Technology Agency, CITAM. Recently, Treasury has had to address the challenges that I've referred to in the management and administration of IFMS transparently and promptly, taking accountable actions to ensure that there are no further impediments to this project. Areas that have been strengthened include development of an integrated program blueprint, strengthening of the oversight function of and the introduction of more robust monitoring and evaluation controls. State-owned companies, ladies and gentlemen, have a substantial impact on perceptions of the sustainability of public sector debt in our country. And as a result, confidence and growth momentum. Perhaps most critically, though, we must acknowledge the impact of state-owned companies on the cost structure of the economy and our overall competitiveness. Minister Gordon detailed in his budget vote a few weeks ago, or last week, the interventions the Department of Public Enterprise has put in place to address these. These will mitigate the risks to financial stability in these enterprises and will begin to help improve the link between the economic outcomes of state-owned companies' efficiencies. National Treasury will support these efforts by leading implementation of specific interventions such as the Oversight Forum, initiatives on the SAA, chaired by the Deputy Minister of Finance. The Cabinet has also approved the private sector participation framework and the framework for costing of developmental mandates of state-owned entities. Intensive National Treasury interventions are specifically targeted at the liquidity positions of SAA and ESCOM and aim to stabilize their financial positions with the immediate intention of limiting government's exposure to these entities going forward. Efforts are also underway to enable these entities to operate on the strength of their own balance sheets. National Treasury also continues to manage 18 entities reporting to the Minister of Finance. Even though the mandates of these entities vary, it is critical that they align their strategies with government policy. These entities are required to submit quarterly reports to the National Treasury to ensure delivery against the social and economic mandates that they agreed to. Payment of suppliers within 30 days, as I said earlier, is a key performance indicator that is being monitored closely. A number of entities have corrective action plans in place to timeously resolve audit findings, which National Treasury continues to monitor closely. National Treasury will continue to require entities to exercise moderation in the awarding of future salary increase. Let me briefly reflect on the work of some of the entities that have been engaged in during the past year. The Development Bank of Southern Africa continues to implement a strategy that is designed to augment disbursements by focusing on its catalytic role to enable sustainable infrastructure development. Through this strategy, the bank is aiming at increasingly crowding in the private sector or third-party funding and growing impact across the spectrum of the infrastructure development value chain that includes financing, project preparation, planning, implementation, and maintenance. During the 2017-18 financial year, a total of 8.7 billion rands was committed for funding, of which 3.5 billion rands was to municipalities and will impact approximately 77,580 households. The remaining 5.2 billion in commitments is in renewable energy and will finance about 42 megawatts of energy. In planning support to secondary and under-resourced municipalities, the bank completed 13 infrastructure master plans that have an estimated project value of 26.7 billion rands, and that will impact an estimated 776,474 households and 8,700 temporary jobs when implemented. The DBSA provided implementation support for the completion of 12 infrastructure projects in electricity, water, sanitation, roads, and stormwater to various municipalities during the past financial year. A total of 21,780 households benefited and 672 temporary job opportunities were created through the completion of these projects. Ladies and gentlemen and honorable members, the PIC plays a vital role in the economy through its investments by supporting the current and future sustainability of financial markets and SOEs, by financing infrastructure projects, and by investing in strategic sectors that have a significant developmental impact on the economy. Through its investments, it aims to drive job creation and transformation in various sectors, and it continues to play a critical developmental role in the country. In terms of its clients' developmental or impact investment mandates, and in line with the PIC's investment strategy aimed at growing and transforming the economy, the PIC is accelerating impact investing in all asset classes by developing sector strategies to key sectors such as healthcare, student accommodation, education, affordable housing, as well as small, medium, and micro enterprises. The PIC will also increase its allocation of funds to its highly successful Black Fund Manager program. The Land Bank is mandated to play a pivotal role in both the growth and inclusive transformation of the agricultural sector. We are happy to note that the Land Bank continues to deliver boldly on its mandate and that it continues to get stronger and stronger in both financial and institutional governance aspects. Over the past 12 months, the Land Bank has been highly successful in raising funding on the strength of its balance sheet from domestic capital markets, as well as funding lines from international sources. Going forward, the bank is committed to focus substantially on transformation investments in agriculture in terms of its corporate plan. The bank plans to invest over 2.5 billion rands in the developmental and transformative segment of agriculture. The Independent Regulatory Board of Auditors, IRBA, the recent revelations about various instances of collusion with auditees as well as general lapses have cast a bad light on the whole profession and have tarnished the image of auditors in general. The Independent Regulatory Board of Auditors is therefore working with the Office of the Accountant General, housed within the National Treasury, to amend the Audit Professions Act 26 of 2005 to restore the credibility of and public trust in the audit profession. The amendment includes strengthening sanctions in line with international best practice, strengthening the regulatory board's powers in its investigation process, and reducing the complexity of disciplinary hearings to ensure a swift, fair, and due process. National Treasury continues to work with sister departments to ensure the government undertakes the key regulatory structural reforms to raise growth. This includes improving policy certainty, strengthening the role of economic regulators, encouraging the use of PPPs, and enhancing the financial sector's contribution to savings, growth, and transformation. We've already seen some progress since the budget. The outstanding projects under the Renewable Energy Independent Power Producer Program have concluded and will unlock investment of about 56 billion rands and create 58,000 jobs. The Single Transport Economic Regulator, which will enable a more competitive transport sector, is being finalized. Restoring policy certainty in the mining sector has been made an urgent priority. The efforts by the Competition Commission to conclude critical market inquiries in private healthcare, the cost of communication and grocery retail will lower the barriers to entry and create opportunities for new entrants to participate in our economic revitalization. The Ease of Doing Business project, undertaken jointly by the World Bank and the national government with extensive support from National Treasury, is designed to address business regulatory challenges. Excuse me, Chairperson. Our city support program is working with 9 of the largest municipalities to improve their performance. If each of the 9 cities participating improves their performance to match the best performing South African city on each metric, we would be more competitive than most OECD countries. That is certainly food for thought. Our city support program goes beyond just looking at regulation. We're working closely with metropolitan municipalities to accelerate the implementation of investment in strategic projects that will bring greater integration to our cities and begin to reverse the spatial inequality legacy of apartheid. National Treasury has taken this call to heart and continues to lead the Chief Executive's initiative. Along with other government departments, we will build on recent achievements such as the launch of the Youth Employment Service Initiative, the YES initiative, and the finalization of the Private Sector Small Business Fund. Future work will focus on labor-intensive sectors such as tourism and agriculture and create more opportunities for young people to participate in the economy. We will continue to play a critical role in communicating with foreign and local investors as well as ratings agencies on the growth agenda, all of which provide important inputs into both the investment and job summits. Our footprint and representation is growing also globally. South Africa's push to increase our growth would be incomplete if we did not take account of the role that we must play in the world and our continent in particular. We are using our chair of SADC and BRICS to drive increased interest and investment in our own country and the region through the development of project pipelines, project preparation, public-private partnerships. Furthermore, the South African Reserve Bank governor has been elected as chair of the International Monetary and Financial Committee, the primary policy advisory body of the International Monetary Fund Board of Governors. This appointment is important for the developing world. As I conclude, Chair, and please brace yourself for another 45 minutes. For the first time in a very long time, it appears that economic growth will be higher than projected at the time of the budget review. That is thanks to the improved business and consumer confidence and a favorable global economic backdrop. This favorable momentum is an opportunity for us to build upon, but we should not be lulled into a false sense of security. We must continue to rebuild our resilience to ensure that we can respond to exogenous shocks that may arise from geopolitical events or volatile financial markets. We need to rebuild trust in our public institutions and the integrity that they should stand for. And we need to deliver on economic reforms, jobs, and investment that South African households and businesses have entrusted us to deliver.
You have 5 minutes.
We remain, did you say 5 minutes? We must continue, we remain mindful of the great expectation that fellow South Africans have of National Treasury. We are charting a course for a sustainable path of spending and borrowing. We are working hard to support better service delivery in provinces and municipalities. We are contributing to ensure that and recapture our state-owned entities and supporting the drive against state capture. We are also driving transformation and growth through procurement reforms, the Chief Executive Initiative, and the Financial Sector Charter reforms. But we cannot do it alone, Chairperson and honorable members. We need the cooperation of the rest of government to drive the efficiencies and innovations required to improve service delivery. Fellow South Africans must play their part too, so do our social partners. Hope, a word that had seemed to die out from our lexicon, is now back on the agenda. But it's back on the agenda in true South African style, with still underneath the tough metal that we South Africans and the National Treasury embody. The toughness to do what is right, no matter how difficult, and the toughness not to let down our guard when there is still so much to be done. We are reminded in this most auspicious year of celebrating the centenary birth of our national icon, founding father and first democratic president, Dr. Nelson Mandela, and one of the principal architects of our democracy, Mama Albertina Nontsikelelo Sisulu, that this is what they stood for. In tabling the budget vote of the National Treasury, Honorable Chair and members, for consideration of the House, I'd like to express my appreciation to the chairs and members of the finance committees who have engaged constructively with the challenges that we confront. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Tobias.
Honorable Chairperson, honorable members, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Up front, I need to say the ANC supports budget vote number 7. Honorable members, as we celebrate the centenary of Madiba and Mam Albertina Sisulu, I dedicate my speech to Mam Winnie Nomzamo Madikizela Mandela, who had since departed this world. I also elect to salute the African National Congress for playing a pivotal role in liberation of the African people from colonial rule, to freedom and democracy. A task that I accept is not easy. I meet criticism on a daily basis that it receives. It is not distracted, it continues to address the national grievance. Therefore, the struggle continues. Honorable Chairperson, last weekend the ANC met to process the matter of expropriation of land without compensation. The modalities derived from that gathering was arrived at by different sectors of our society. Theirs was the understanding that building a social compact to realize inclusive growth is imperative. And therefore, the ANC continues to promise to deliver on its mandate. Today, as we discuss the National Treasury's budget vote, the following needs to be taken into consideration. 1, business confidence is improving. 2, more payments of debts by business is improving. And 3, the services sector is getting a boost. And lastly, the economy is growing. We also welcome back Minister Nhlanhla Nene, who started in February of the current financial year, and wish him well in these continuing responsibilities of transforming the economy. He was just on a sabbatical, honorable members. Honorable members, the ANC's 54th National Conference resolved that the South African government needs to urgently reignite economic growth. It further resolved that we need to form a social pact between government, labor, and business to realize investment. But over and above this, it also resolves that we need to stabilize governance and finances of state-owned companies for them to play a developmental role. So that's the conference resolution of the African National Congress, nobody else, which this government is busy realizing. And the most fundamental resolution is how to strike a balance between our macroeconomic policy and the growth path. And having said the above, we hereby scrutinize the role of National Treasury to achieve the above. We also congratulate the National Treasury for prioritizing management of public debt and improvement of municipalities' finances through a program to improve skills. In the same vein, we focus our attention on the initiatives that the department has announced now through the minister. We also welcome the funding of the Commission of State Capture, which is a commitment to fight corruption, and we further believe that more attention will be paid on the South African Revenue Services to preserve its image and integrity. We also welcome the CEO initiative, which will bring about economic growth. In the current financial year, 57 billion was injected through the fiscus for fee-free higher education, an achievement, honorable members, which needs to be celebrated with an applause. Also, 2.6 billion was budgeted for social grants to offset against inflation to poor households against VAT 1% increase. We also welcome the turnaround strategy by National Treasury to oversee delinquent departments and municipalities. Therefore, the situation, honorable members, in the Northwest, which led to the implementation of Section 100, is very unfortunate. We need responsible and accountable leadership. Our financial systems ensure compliance through capacity. Therefore, government officials need to adhere to established policies or face the music. We are also satisfied that National Treasury has attended to concerns raised in the Standing Committee on reviewing revenue sharing models, and as South Africa is now the chairperson of SADC, we hope the matter will receive utmost attention. We are also satisfied that JIPA has improved its performance on handling our pension matters by improving the data systems. We also saw Program 8 focusing on urban integration, and the Jobs Fund targeted the agricultural sector respectively through efficiency in grant allocations. Also allow me to brag about achievables. I'm just joining the minister. One, we have delivered a BRICS bank. Our DG is part of that. We are combating illicit financial flows, Honorable Floyd. And we are chairing BRICS. We are also chairing SADC. Ooh, what an achievement, honorable members. Team National Treasury, congratulations. Having said the above, we also take serious challenges of liquidity with our SOCs. We accept the conditions that led to recapitalization of SAA to the tune of 10 billion in the 2017-2018 financial year. We also regret last week the DA display to the gallery when we had an opportunity to take members into confidence through CEO Mr. Vuani Jahan on the market-sensitive turnaround strategy that will see SAA being turned to profitability and liquidity. We hope moving forward, all parties will be unanimous in ensuring that we have a successful country. We also acknowledge that 4.8 billion payment for SAA is not reflected in the budget. And that should be attended to. And we also hope that 9.2 billion, which was supposed to be paid to lenders, will be paid on record time. We also noted the fact that Eskom needs to borrow 20 billion to address the falling coal stocks to avoid a fall below minimum levels. And we are confident that the financial matters will be managed in a responsible manner by officials. We also hereby report upfront that the committee does support private sector participation to turn around SOCs. However, the ruling party has not yet tabled a policy on privatization. Therefore, we support National Treasury in stabilizing these entities, but equally we advocate for the rooting out of corruption and maladministration in our SOCs. We also hope that the National Treasury will address concerns raised by members in relation to Section 32 committees on municipalities in effecting appropriate tariffs and understanding legislation. Honorable members, the committee also welcomes the fact that government did not breach the expenditure ceiling in 2017-2018, and we further support National Treasury's renewed focus on economic growth and investment and job creation, particularly youth, as outlined by the President through the Youth Entrepreneurship Service Program. The 10-point plan outlined by the President during the State of the Nation address should be implemented with vigor. We also report that the committee is hands-on in relation to the SARS matter and supports the President with the manner in which he handled the matter. We'll address the Makwakwa matter as we will receive a briefing tomorrow from Acting SARS Commissioner, and we will deal with the KPMG matters. We have also expressed our concerns on the behavior of auditing firms, and we are dealing with the Steinhoff, VBS, and liquid trading matters respectively. We therefore entrust IRBA to dig deep into these matters, and we have also addressed the financial sector transformation matter and made recommendations. And the committee has noted the weaknesses of certain municipalities and hope this matter is receiving urgent attention. Lastly, we can report to the comfort of the Chief Whip of the majority
You have
party
2 minutes.
that all legislation before the Portfolio Committee will be deliberated on record time. We hereby request that the House adopts the budget of National Treasury because it is progressive. The ANC support budget vote 7. I thank you, Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mayor.
House Chairperson, we would like to begin by welcoming the Minister of Finance and Nene back to the front benches as Finance Minister in Parliament. He is, of course, new, but he is not that new. And he was one of those rare people who did have, as he said, the toughness to do what is right at a time when it was tough to do what is right. And we compliment him for that. We are confident that, unlike his predecessor, who loved to bash National Treasury, he will spend some time bashing those who bash National Treasury. House Chairperson, the primary objective of fiscal policy, which of course is the primary purpose of National Treasury, is to stabilize national debt in South Africa. However, this has been a spectacular failure, with national government debt measured as net loan debt set to balloon to a staggering 3.03 trillion rand, or 52.2% of GDP in 2021. There is a question mark, given the pressure on spending, about whether national debt measured as net loan debt will actually stabilize at 53.2% of GDP in 2023-24. But assuming that it does, we will be spending a staggering 277 billion rand on debt service costs in 2023-24, which is 30 billion rand more than we will be spending on education this year in 2018-19. That, by any account, is a staggering figure. We therefore need to be honest about who ultimately is responsible for the failure to stabilize national debt in South Africa. We here, as members of Parliament, are required in terms of the Money Bills Amendment Procedure and Related Matters Act to pass the fiscal framework and specifically to ensure that debt levels and debt service costs are reasonable in South Africa. However, the fact is the fiscal framework is rubber-stamped every year by this Parliament, which in my view amounts to a dereliction of duty, given that we are required to ensure that debt levels and debt service costs are reasonable in South Africa. The buck stops here with members of Parliament. We therefore need some new and innovative thinking about how to deal with the staggering levels of national debt and debt service costs in South Africa. And we have therefore written to the Speaker of the National Assembly, Baleka Mbete, giving notice of our intention to introduce a private member's bill in terms of Section 73(2) of the Constitution, entitled the Fiscal Responsibility Bill in this Parliament. The Fiscal Responsibility Bill aims inter alia to introduce a fiscal rule to reduce national debt and debt service costs in South Africa. First, the Fiscal Responsibility Bill provides for a fiscal rule prescribing that for each financial year from 2019-20 to 2022-23, net loan debt expressed as a percentage of GDP must not be more than it was in the previous year. Second, the bill provides for a review of the fiscal rule by the National Assembly every 4 years, beginning in 2023-24, by either amending, renewing, or terminating the fiscal rule. And it provides for an annual fiscal responsibility report to be tabled by the Finance Minister, setting out whether the fiscal rules have been complied with or not, together with reasons for those outcomes and recovery plans in the event of a failure to comply with the fiscal rule. And finally, because South Africa is a small, open economy, vulnerable to shocks, the Fiscal Responsibility Bill provides for an exemption from the rule to be granted in respect of a specific financial year or years by the National Assembly upon application by the Minister of Finance, with good cause shown and on recommendation of the Finance Committee. Whatever you may think of the merits of the proposal, the Fiscal Responsibility Bill, had this Fiscal Responsibility Bill been in place, the former Minister of Finance, Malusi Gigaba, would not have had the discretion to deliver his now infamous kamikaze medium-term budget policy statement, which blew up the budget and risked a catastrophic, full-blown sovereign credit ratings downgrade to junk status of South Africa. The Fiscal Responsibility Bill is, to the best of my knowledge, the first proposed statutory fiscal rule in South Africa. We still have a lot of work to do before introducing the final version of the bill in Parliament. A notice of intent to introduce the private members' bill will be published in the Government Gazette shortly, inviting comments from interested parties, which we will consider before introducing the final version of the Fiscal Responsibility Bill in Parliament. We look forward to working with the executive, with political parties, civil society, trade unions, and interested members of the public in developing the final version of the Fiscal Responsibility Bill, which we think will go a long way to containing and stabilizing national debt and debt service costs in South Africa. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Munir. Honorable Shivambo.
No, thank you very much, Chairperson. So, the statement here that the ANC is dealing with illicit financial flows is schizophrenic. How do you say you're dealing with illicit financial flows when corporate income tax as a component of the overall revenue is declining? It must reflect on the numbers. Those are just basic conceptual confusions that defy the ruling party. We're now approaching the end of the 5th Democratic Parliament. And our honest observation is that the ruling party is defined by collective incapacity, negligence, mediocrity, and cowardice. And this is reflected largely in the ownership and control of the financial services sector, that the banks continue to be owned by those that did prior 1994. It's just even insertion of the foreign banks. The Reserve Bank has approved new licenses of white-owned banks that are still existing. Now, because we're going to be government next year, and we're going to run National Treasury next year, so you must remember this very well. So when we do it and present the budget vote minister, we're going to be doing it and deal with the following issues. One, we're going to make sure that the Banks Act, as we have already tabled the amendment bill, permits for the state to own banks. Currently, the legislative framework doesn't allow the state to own banks. So that is one issue that we must deal with as soon as possible. And it is not just for the creation of the post bank into a fully fledged bank, but for other banks as well, including an agricultural support bank, which will then begin to finance agrarian reform in light of the fact that we're going to expropriate land without compensation. The second issue, which we have already tabled the private members' bill on, is on discontinuing of private ownership of the South African Reserve Bank. Because it's one of the 7 in the world that have got private shareholders. So we're going to make sure that the South African Reserve Bank is fully owned by the South African state. And of course, we should retain its relative autonomy with a clear mandate in terms of what should happen. Now, in the immediate, there are certain issues that the South African Reserve Bank must deal with. And one of those issues is to exit the African Bank. When you were here as minister, you persuaded Parliament, of course with the resistance of the EFF, to rescue the African Bank. It is currently stable. So the Reserve Bank cannot continue to be a major shareholder in a bank because it is a regulator through the Prudential Authority. So as a matter of urgency,
You have 2 minutes.
before even this 5th Democratic Parliament finishes, we should make sure that the Reserve Bank and other banks exit the African Bank and give that to black owners and the state. So there must be a combination of the state and black owners of African Bank so that we begin to transform the banking space. The other issue which, of course, we are going to put private members' bill on and clearly define is the issue of the sovereign fund, which we have already given clearer conceptual basis in terms of what should happen moving forward. The last issue, which is a policy position that must be dealt with, is to convert the PIC debt in ESCOM, possibly even in SAA, into equity. And that should be defined by structural reforms of how these state companies are managed. So the 110 billion which ESCOM owes the PIC should be turned into equity, and then we deal with how ESCOM is managed in a way that will somehow reflect how AXA it's currently owned. It's one of the immediate interventions that you can deal with, but because of the observation that I've made earlier that the ANC is defined by collective incapacity, mediocrity, negligence, and cowardice, you are most unlikely to deal with all of these basic issues that you have to deal with. So in that basis, we do not support the budget vote because we think that the ANC is led by cowards. Thank you very much.
Sibonge order. Sibonge lunga hloniphekile. Sibize lunga hloniphekile. Hlengwa Maliyegwe.
Honorable Chairperson, at the outset, on behalf of the IFP, would like to welcome the Minister back and wish him well in his duties and responsibilities. For time immemorial post-1994, National Treasury has been the model department when compared to other departments. But in recent years, we have seen it slide into a compromised position plagued by instability owing to a brain drain of experienced financial minds. It has now been rocked by scandal upon scandal and found itself in the belly of state capture. The growth of the economy has come to a grinding halt, and the tax base has shrank, unemployment skyrocketed, and SARS began to crumble. Debt servicing costs now stand at 180 billion rands a year. State-owned companies are the perennial bane of the fiscus, and our climb out of unfavorable credit ratings is at a snail pace. Government spending in the face of competing priorities and grave challenges has not focused on national needs, but rather has been an egotistic and luxurious splurge on wants. The fat has not been cut. There is just no financial or legislative discipline on the part of accounting officers to manage their budgets in a manner which is consistent with the PFMA, MFMA, and other national treasury regulations, because consequences are absent in the financial management discourse of this country. Wasteful, fruitless, and irregular expenditure have become a norm which goes by unpunished. Expansions and deviations of tenders has become a norm to bypass competitive bidding processes and undermine SCM policies, thereto without consequences. Simply put, Honorable Chairperson, all is not well in the state of South Africa. South African Airways is a problem child, which has become an unsustainable vanity project, and the taxpayer can no longer be expected to bear the brutal brunt of the endless bailouts being extended to SAA. It is time to bite the bullet and begin processes of selling SAA. The current funding model is not working. The economy does not have deep enough pockets to continue with the junket expenditure on SAA. SARS, a once reputable organization, is a shadow of its former self, as it is now on one hand failing to collect enough revenue and is plagued by scandals on the other. The restoration of institutional credibility and capacity is of urgency, and this includes but is not limited to the removal of Tom Moyane and other rotten agents of state capture. The unforgivable sin of implementing the regressive VAT increase under the cheap guise that it is in the interest of the poor, whereas exactly the opposite is true, is the clearest indication yet that all is not well in South Africa. The IFP expects an announcement, Honorable Minister, in the 2019 budget speech that VAT will be lowered back to 14% and that other cost-cutting measures will instead be effected. In the meantime, the exercise of expanding the list of zero-rated items is taking far too long, and quite frankly, it is our view that this should have been done concurrently with a narrow-minded and ill-calculated VAT increase. In conclusion, the IFP expects the new political leadership at National Treasury to restore trust, confidence, and efficiency. The IFP is mindful of the circumstances which led to Minister Nana being fired and hope that he will be firm in his resolve of managing the national budget in a manner which improves the collective sustainable livelihoods of the people and in particularly the poor. So, Honorable Minister, we know ukuthi wawuxoshela ukumele iqiniso. Sesibonga uNkulunkulu ukuthi
Allow
usuvuyile
us
kodwa
to hear the
ungamphoxike
speaker.
uNkulunkulu ukuthi okubuyiselwe ukwenze ngokuthembeka ngoba kwazi ukuthi imali yabantu intshontsho emini kaBha uthenjiwe ukuthi lo msebenzi wenze sithenjwa ukuthi imali zaseNingizimu Afrika ziphatheke ngendlela. On that note, the IFP supports the budget vote.
Honorable Kwankwa. Honorable members, allow us all to hear the speaker.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Honorable Tobias, let's start here. I was part of a meeting that took a decision in principle. I must say, that took a decision in principle to say that we are going to have a closed session to discuss some of the issues that were business sensitive around SAA. So to say that there was never such a decision is not true. The second issue is that, look, Minister, firstly, you have a problem of low economic growth, a compounder by effect. Nina, for instance, you had many years of mismanagement and corruption that was left unchecked in the system. Now, the problem with that is that now with your average economic growth over the past decade of 1.4%, and you have population growth, ECOLA at a rate that is slightly higher than that, the problem you have is that now over the past 10 years or so, living standards have declined because the per capita income, it declined, as you know. But the other issue now is that you have income inequality, or as you could, it's one of the worst in the world. But still, we then take a decision to say we are going to increase VAT and not look at corporate income tax. I think we've said this many times before. It's not true. I don't understand why we first take a decision to increase VAT and then after that set up a system to say, let us check the impact and try to mitigate the impact on the poor of a VAT increase. What should have happened, ideally, is that long before you took the decision to increase VAT, you should have actually taken steps to try and mitigate the impact of a VAT increase on the poor, which is not what happened here in South Africa in this case. Look, Treasury gave us a forward guidance. They gave us a forward guidance as far back as 2015 in one of their budget reviews, where they showed a table of countries as net VAT in the world, emerging economies, comparing the rates, and I said to them, this is forward guidance, you are saying in future you're going to consider raising VAT. And the answer was an emphatic no, because it was a politically sensitive issue. That is the time when you should have taken steps to try and mitigate, or to take these steps of trying to mitigate a VAT increase on the poor, the impact on the poor. Not now, then we take an increase and then we say, the other issue here is that we continue to have a problem with an education system that does not adequately prepare our people for umsebenzi. I want to quote something that was written by IMF on talking about this thing of weak educational attainment or weak quality of education. They say it contributes to wide income disparities, high unemployment, perpetuates the intergenerational transmission of poverty, right? And the last aspect, they say, it also constrains growth. Now, part of a strategy that should try to improve the growth prospects of the country is to attend precisely to this issue of education. Because then, into Zagwazugians is that even the issue of unemployment, youth that's standing at well above 50%, for example, then decisive interventions, apart from just saying you're going to Sydney to Meleku learnerships, nifike panyo photocopy and that's it. But make decisive interventions where abantu bazawukwazi ukufunda and contribute meaningfully to the economy. But the other issue which is important, Chairperson, can't you give me 10 more minutes? The other issue which is critical, which is critical, is the one of saying youth-owned business enterprises, good government business and procurement should be prioritized as a strategy to try and address this problem. Minister, the rising contingent liabilities of state-owned enterprises remain a concern, and if not managed properly, will lead to further downgrades in future for South Africa. Reforms have been undertaken, I agree, so far on governance issues, but for as long as the politicians that facilitated the looting of those state resources, as ithathwa ziyofakwa ejele, including these officials who steal imali, who are not going to address this problem.
Please conclude.
Siyanisapota nisixwaxwa ninjalo amasela. Sinisapota ngenxeba nje kusekho uminister omtsha ku gigabyte besingazonisapota.
The Honourable Vessels. Honourable Vessels.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, each year we hear in all spheres of government a lot about turnaround plans, cost containment measures, and doing more with less. We heard today that trust must be rebuilt and that trust must be restored in our revenue collector in SARS, that trust in our SOEs must be restored and rebuilt, that we must root out, and we are rooting out, corruption and mismanagement at SOEs and at other state entities, that government is restoring accountability and responsible governance to municipalities and to government. We hear achievement that officials that are doing government or doing business with government and with the state are being identified. We hear that each year. We hear about the rooting out of state capture and the investigation thereof. But Chairperson, what we must ask ourselves today is, how did we end up here? How did we end up here? The Honourable Tobias could not even find any achievements of her government on domestic soil. She had to look for it at BRICS. At BRICS, no, Honourable Tobias, at BRICS. We have a crisis. Chairperson, the crisis manifests with the abuse of power and looting. There is no political will to effect consequence management on all levels and to stop the mismanagement and looting. National Treasury should be commended for their attempts to provide guidance, monitor, and to attempt to provide good governance. There's a lot of Treasury investigations over the last 10 years, and we can quote quite a number of those investigation reports. And the honourable members should take note. If a lot of those reports and investigations were taken serious from the beginning, a lot of scandals that shook your ruling party would have been prevented. Let's cite two examples. Freda Dairy, there was a National Treasury investigation a number of years ago, but it was ignored. The Ace Magashule scandal with regards to the websites was ignored. PRASA, a National Treasury investigation report on PRASA
Honourable
was
members,
ignored.
let us hear the Speaker.
A lot of scandals could have been prevented if National Treasury and their investigations are taken serious. But it's not. Chairperson, the Honourable Tobias spoke of inclusive growth. But we can never accomplish inclusive growth only by redistributing. We will only accomplish actual growth that will address the plight of everybody in South Africa if we have economic growth and restore the trust in our private sector. By only keeping the cake that is the South African economy the same size and trying to redistribute it, we are actually just rearranging
Honourable
the
members
chairs on the Titanic's deck. Let us wake up, let us address the problems, the current problems, let us live in the present, and let us focus on the future. I thank you.
Right. Honourable Konyeni.
Honourable Chairperson, honourable members, honourable Minister, and honourable Deputy Ministers who are present here, the DG and officials from the National Treasury, esteemed guests in the gallery. From the very onset, I wish to affirm the ANC's unreserved support for this budget. Honourable Chairperson, it is a matter of privilege for me to take part in the debate on vote number 7. This debate takes place during the important year in our history on centenary celebration of Mama Albertina Nontsikelelo Sisulu and Tata Nelson Mandela, the giants of our struggle. These were giants who were resolute and had unwavering commitment to our struggle. Today's debate would deal with challenges that would need resoluteness and unwavering commitment to deal with such challenges. It is said that Mama Albertina Sisulu was amongst the few women who were part of the official launch of the ANC Youth League in 1944. She said, and I quote, "Women are the people who are going to relieve us from all these oppressions and depressions," close quotes. She was steadfast and resolute to the cause. We should remember that the ANC has called for the certainty with regards to economic policy transformation. At the heart of this certainty would be the rigorous push for radical socio-economic transformation. This debate should be seen as part of steps that we are taking to implement this. As we debate the National Treasury budget allocation, we are cognizant that National Treasury is the engine for national revenue, which would assist us to realize what was adopted in the 54th National Conference of the ruling party, the African National Congress. We need to effectively and efficiently utilize the resources we have in our government departments and state entities. We must be responsive to that call and make sure that, as reflected in the 54th National Elective Conference of the ANC, that the state must develop a more effective program to ensure access to and ownership of financial institutions by Black people, youth, and women. So says the African National Congress. And this should include new approaches to regulations and licensing that fosters competition and enables a diversified ownership. Working towards the implementation of the ANC national elective resolutions, National Treasury is encouraged to work towards stabilizing the governance and finances of state-owned companies and ensuring that SOEs play a developmental role, because the main purpose of establishment of these SOEs is to operationalize the broad socio-economic development plans of this government. And that the DFIs should give greater emphasis to employment creation, empowerment, industrial diversification and development, small businesses and cooperatives, small-scale agriculture, micro-enterprises, and local and regional economic development. And that state procurement should be used as an empowerment lever. And that set-asides must be further strengthened so that they work more effectively in promoting Black businesses, youth-owned and women-owned businesses, including businesses owned by people with disabilities. With regards to the financial sector transformation, we need to be cognizant of the fact that in order for us to achieve the prosperity in this country and to be able to provide dignified basic services, the economic sector needs to transform. The ANC has always campaigned for the financial sector transformation because we understand that access to finance and financial services are key to achieving economic and social transformation. We are of the view that the financial sector ultimately belongs to customers, and financial firms are merely custodians of people's money. The ANC supports the minister's new Twin Peaks system approach of financial regulations, which was launched by Minister Nhlanhla Nene in April this year, in line with the ANC's commitment to promote financial transformation. The minister indicated that Twin Peaks approach aims to create a safer financial sector that works effectively in the interests of all South Africans by reducing potential threats to the financial system and providing better protection to financial customers. At the launch, Minister Nene noted that Twin Peaks, I quote, "Twin Peaks is a dynamic, innovative, and smart system. It aims to streamline our approach to financial regulations and to clearly define roles and responsibilities and to create flexibility. It creates a dedicated prudential authority to look after safety and soundness of financial institutions and a dedicated market conduct authority to look after the way financial institutions treat their customers, I close quotes. The ANC policies have achieved and shall push for more in order to be able to create jobs, eliminate poverty, and narrow the inequality gap. We need to be reminded of the fact that the Freedom Charter prescribes that the people shall share in the country's wealth. And as declared in the Freedom Charter, it is said that we need to further make sure that the mineral wealth beneath the soil is in the hands of the people. The banks and monopoly industry should be transferred to the ownership of the people as a whole, and all other industry and trade must be controlled to assist the well-being of the people, and that all people shall have equal rights to trade where they choose and to manufacture and to enter the trades, crafts and profession. With regards to illicit financial flows, it is a fact that Africa loses billions of rands in illicit financial flows. South Africa is not spared on this problem, which is defined as all unrecorded private financial outflows involving capital that is illegally earned, transferred, or utilized in contravention of applicable capital controls and regulatory frameworks. South Africa is one of the countries losing billions of rands, and this needs to be dealt with a sense of urgency. And the cooperation between financial institutions and government agencies is critical in dealing with illicit financial flows. The Financial Intelligence Center is a significant tool for monitoring the financial sector, but it is limited to monitoring the formal financial sector. The financial sector has a high level of compliance with the financial intelligence sector. The Act and recent amendments give the Reserve Bank significant powers to monitor transactions and require banks to report suspicious transactions. In other words, the ANC-led government is doing something about this illicit, to curb the illicit financial flows. With regards to illicit tobacco trade, we are saying this is another worrying aspect in our economy because it has a negative effect on tobacco tax revenue. And seeing the magnitude of this problem, the committee recently received a briefing looking at the impact of illicit tobacco trade. The impact to our economy is huge, and our borders are used as trafficking transits of cigarettes, and they are becoming accessible to children. And we are saying this also needs to be dealt with. In conclusion, Honorable Chairperson, I wish to emphasize that these are complex issues to deal with, but they need strong will and determination. President Mandela once said, and I quote, "The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear." Close quotes. Honorable Chair, I thank you, and the ANC supports the budget.
Honorable Carter.
Chair, it was her maiden speech. It was her maiden speech.
I can hardly hear you, Honorable
I'm saying
Member.
it was the member's maiden speech.
Was that, I didn't have that written down. I have the Honorable Ingwenya as a maiden speech. So I do apologize. I wasn't made aware of that. Thank you.
Chairperson.
Honorable Carter.
Chairperson.
Yes. Honorable
Can I raise a point of order? It's to put to the House, is there any opposition member who can deliver such a good speech as a maiden speech? Thank you.
Honorable Karim, that's not a point of order, all right? Let us just proceed. Right, Honorable Carter.
The maiden speech wasn't for Honorable Carter, but the previous speaker. Yeah. Chair, as far back as the RDP white paper, government acknowledged the need for good, clean, responsible and progressive governance, of an interdependence between economic growth and the objectives of reconstruction and development. That meaningful transformation would only be possible if the economy was placed on a path of high and sustainable growth, of a need for sound macroeconomic policies to promote an integrated and coherent growth and development strategy, of a need to reprioritize government expenditure by cutting down on recurrent expenditure to release funding for meaningful delivery, and of a need for fiscal prudence to reduce our fiscal deficit. Now, Treasury plays a central role in achieving and protecting these ideals. Now, Chair, during the Mandela and Mbeki eras, a macroeconomic environment was created which facilitated a period of sustained growth and development. A world-class, modern, progressive, and trusted taxation authority was established, and fiscal prudence was practiced such that our deficit was reduced. However, when the traditionalists and the left-wing components of a ruling party combined to capture and corrupt the ANC and overthrow President Mbeki, they subjected South Africa to the devastation of a Zuma tsunami, of rampant corruption and looting, and the capture of a state with a president of the ANC and government at the apex of a criminal syndicate of political elite. The ANC changed our governance, our economic and fiscal trajectories with devastating consequences. Consequences such as a debt sitting at 44.1% of GDP. This equals to each citizen being in debt equal to 36,795 rand. This means 3,293 rand interest per second. We've seen a VAT increment affecting the poorest of the poor. And like a tsunami, Chair, the real extent of the damage caused by the ruling party during the Zuma era is becoming more evident as this tsunami recedes. The consequences of this decade of betrayal of our nation by the ruling party are, Chair, that in the face of rising legitimate demands upon government as a consequence of a stagnant economy, government is having to start the process to undo and reverse the damage done to the state, the fiscus, and the economy by the ruling party. During this debate last year, to jeers from the ruling party, Cope defended Treasury in the face of a state capture attack by the president of the ANC and the country and his band of thieves. Now the clawback must commence. Cope supports the budget vote on the proviso that SARS must be recaptured and its integrity and efficiency re-established. That Treasury itself must be stabilized in the face of the dissemination of its senior management. That recalcitrant departments must be brought back into line to comply with procurement and fiscal discipline, and that Treasury must support attempts to restart economic growth and development, foster good governance, ensure the accountable, efficient, and sustainable management of our public finances, and re-establish our macroeconomic stability. Thank you.
Honourable Sheikh Amam.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. The National Freedom Party welcomes the BRR report of National Treasury tabled here today. It's a pity, Honourable Chairperson, that my colleague, Honourable Wessels, have left the room, but he wanted to know how we ended up where we are, and I wanted to tell him how we ended up where we are. We ended up where we are because of hundreds of years of oppression. We inherited a bankrupt state. Corruption was the order of the day. Manipulation was the order of the day. Maladministration was the order of the day. That is why we are where we are today. But also, let me also remind this House, Honourable Chairperson, having been deprived of good quality health, having been deprived of water, of electricity, of sanitation, where our people were dehumanized, could not live in dignity, you cannot really expect to achieve all this in 24 years. It's not an easy task. Because when the apartheid regime of some of my colleagues here on the left, when they, in pre-1994, had this calculated move to take anyone that was not white and dump them into certain corners, deprive them of all the privileges that they are supposed to have enjoyed. It is as a result of that today, we are where we are. So let us not expect any miracles in terms of that. But at the same time, yes, we've made lots and lots of mistakes, and I think the time has come where we must learn from our mistakes and correct. Yes.
Honourable members.
Let me answer. Let me answer the we. You see why my colleagues on the left want to know about we? Because they're not part of the solution. For them, it is us and you. For them, they want to keep power. They want to maintain that control. That is exactly, and that is why you would find how badly they've messed up the Western Cape.
Please. Yes, Honourable
Members
Tobias.
of the DA are drowning the speaker. I can't hear him. I want to hear his point.
Honourable members, let us hear the speaker. Yes, Honourable Kwankwa.
Chairperson, I want to correct that. It's actually the cheerleaders from the ANC who are drowning out the speaker.
No, let's not have these. Honourable Sheikh Imam, please carry on.
Honourable Chairperson, allow me to also comment on another issue. Not a single, and let me repeat, not a single political party on my left. I repeatedly hear them talk about corruption on the right.
Chair,
but not a single one spoke about the Western Cape High Court's decision that the DA were corrupt in issuing 113 million rand tender.
Honourable Sheikh Imam.
Not a single one on the left spoke about Helen Zille's
Honourable
corruption.
Sheikh Imam.
Yes, ma'am.
1 moment, please. Yes.
Chair,
Is your point of order?
Chair, I ask this question with tears in my eyes. Can I do my point of order?
The point of order.
I'm asking this question with tears in my eyes, with pain in my heart.
Just hear the point of order.
The question is, this man has been begging for a job for the longest time.
That is not
Can the
a point
ANC
of
take
order.
pity on him? It is
Please take your
painful.
seat.
I've got tears in my eyes for him.
Now,
Honourable Chairperson,
members from
maybe
both-
Honourable Van Dam should ask them why they demoted her.
Honourable McPherson, please. Now, I'd like you just for a moment, let us wait for order. Honourable members, I am waiting for a little bit of lower volume. Now, Honourable Sheikh Imam.
Can I continue? Thank you. Tell Honourable Kasim not to forget how when he went to Israel and Palestine, he had to get a special permit written in Hebrew for him to go through. Tell him that. He won't talk about that one. He knows what we're talking about. Anyway, I was talking about the issue of corruption. Yes, it exists and it's a serious problem and must be dealt with.
Chairperson, point of order.
What is your point of order?
Chairperson, the member is misleading the House.
Honourable members, Honourable Tlengwa, I cannot hear the point of order. Right. Let us hear your point of order.
Chairperson, thank you. The member is misleading the House. That is far
I
from
haven't
the
heard
truth.
the point of order.
I'm rising in terms of point 92, Honourable Chairperson.
Right.
Right. The member at the podium is misleading the House. He's not telling the truth. That is far from the truth, the statement that has been made.
That is a very serious allegation.
It is a serious
And
allegation.
quite frank, according to the rules, we cannot simply make that sort of allegation without substantifying it. We really can't.
I don't know why Honourable Chairperson is running away from the fact he needed a special permit to go and visit Palestine. Honourable Kasim. And it was in Israel, and it was in Hebrew. They had to write it in Hebrew to give a message. He knows what we're talking about. But anyway, we were talking about the issue, Chairperson, about corruption. We were talking about corruption now. The right-hand man of Helen Ziller gave 70 million rand worth of contracts to his mother-in-law and his her right-hand person. Why is none of these political parties talking about that? It is because they don't want to find solutions. As long as there are problems, they can grandstand. But when it is time to find solutions in the interest of the people, they don't want to do that.
Right, honourable member, please take your seat for a moment. No, please take your seat for a moment. Now, honourable members, it's one thing to say an honourable member is misleading the House. That's one issue. It's quite a different issue to allege that the member is being untruthful. So let us remember to remain parliamentary in the House. We don't want to prolong the debate unnecessarily, so let us allow the Honourable Sheikh Imam to continue.
Honourable Chairperson, it's very difficult because my colleagues on the left don't like to be told how corrupt they are. This is the crux of the problem. But be that as it may, Honourable Chairperson, Minister, state-owned entities that pose a risk must be put under management to bring it back to profitability or viability.
Your point of order.
There is no reason why a government entity, if run on business principles, cannot be viable.
Honourable Sheikh Imam, one moment. What is your point of order?
It's one thing to raise a point and to debate, but when you make false statements, then it is a serious allegation, not from myself. Chairperson, I want to make my point. The member at the podium has said that we are all corrupt, and that statement is false. He cannot make a statement like that.
That is a point of debate. He is not directing it to any one member. No, and let us stop making these points of order unnecessarily. Yes, honourable member?
Honourable Chairperson, the Western Cape High Court decision is public knowledge, so I don't know what my colleagues are talking about here, but be that
Honourable
Chairperson,
Sheikh Imam,
there are serious challenges in
Sheikh
SARS.
Imam, one moment, I'll tell you when to continue. Yes?
Honourable House Chair, thank you very much. I rise in terms on a point of order in terms of Rule 69. And in terms of that rule, the Democratic Alliance has had the space, has had the speaker, and we all listened, and some of the things they were saying were untruthful, but what they are now doing, this is the third spurious point of order, and I would really ask you to rule in terms of Rule 69, whether this grossly disorderly conduct should be allowed, and also to caution the DA that you are degenerating the debate. We are interested in this debate. Raise your facts, please, but don't be disruptive. We want to hear the debate, and we will win the debate, as you have seen already. Thank you.
All right, honourable members, before we allow the Honourable Imam to continue, one moment. No, please take your seat. We already have a point of order behind you.
Chairperson, if the Honourable Nguni is so concerned about not being able to hear what the Sheikh Imam is saying, is there no way that the Sheikh Imam can just tell him at their caucus?
No, you're not raising a point of order. You are not raising a point of order. Now, I want to appeal to all members on both sides of the House, but in particular, one or two. Please don't raise these little points of order which is really leading to a disruption. Some very serious statements were made by different speakers. This is a debate. Allow the Honourable Member to conclude. Thank you. Honourable Sheikh Imam.
Thank you, Honourable Chairperson. Honourable Minister, the issue of illicit financial flows, it's a two-way thing. We have a serious problem in that, yes, there are hundreds of businesses, particularly foreign businesses, and also the big business and where there's monies that are leaving the country are unaccounted for, and I think it's a matter that we need to deal with. But equally, we also need to do with the issues of financial flows into the countries where political parties are being funded to destabilize the country. That is also a matter that we need to look into very, very seriously. As to how they're getting their money, and, sorry, 1 minute. How they're getting their monies in under the table, in the brown envelopes and this thing. We need to look at that very, very seriously, because that is actually destabilizing the country. And that continues. I mean, you can see what happened in terms of the 600 million that the DA was supposed to get from Israel. Again, it was corruption. That is what they were going to do. That's what they were going to benefit. Now, that does not mean that because we stopped it, they're not going to get it, Minister. It's going to continue. It's going to come underneath the table. Some of them go and visit. They collect these brown envelopes, and it continues. So we need to put measures also there to stop them. Honorable Minister, when we talk about state-owned entities, Honorable Minister, like I said before, that we must bring, if any state entity is not performing, the time has come now to take drastic measures, even if it means we need to put them under management, so that we can bring them back into profitability, so that they can now become a profitable or viable organization. But
please conclude.
Sorry. Okay. Is it okay? The National Freedom Party supports the report tabled here today. Thank you very much.
Honorable Shivambu.
I did not want to raise a point of order because the speaker was still on the platform. But when he started there, he said he's coming to debate the BRRR process. It's not BRRR, it's a budget vote process. So I think we must just ignore everything else that is said. And then we proceed because he missed the point completely. So he wanted to speak. He can speak anywhere else, but he must at least understand basic things that are busy with. Thank you.
No, I think the point is taken by all of us, Honourable Shivambu. Honourable Swart.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, the ACDP also welcomes Mr. Neni back as Finance Minister, he who took a stand against state capture. Welcome, sir. Now, one of the most insightful comments made earlier this month was by the National Treasury DG, when he warned that South Africa is at risk of becoming a failed state because of state capture. To quote him, if he was quoted correctly, he said, "We have to ensure that we take a stand. We are not a failed state, but we are on the verge of becoming a failed state, and we were party to that." In a frank admission, he said, "We've looked the other way for many years as public servants, and we should not. We should take a stand and not be forced to do what is unlawful." And so well done, sir, for saying that statement. But the sad situation is that there are many public servants that are being forced to do what is unlawful. For how much longer are we going to tolerate that? And we from the ACDP side appeal to all public servants that are being forced to do things unlawfully to report that. You are under an obligation to do that in terms of the Corruption Act and report it to us here in Parliament. Thankfully, we are all in the process of recapturing the state. And if you think this process was limited to the Guptas and Mr. Duduzana Zuma, you'd be very mistaken. Fraud and corruption run very deep and need to be exposed and dealt with at every level of society, including in the private sector. However, there is far more that we as parliamentarians can do if there is the political will. We illustrated that when the cleaning out of the rot at the SABC. We illustrated that in the Eskom inquiry, which was conducted under severe pressure, death threats, and acts of intimidation. And I wish to commend, we from the ACDP wish to commend all the MPs across political parties that stood firmly in exposing the rot at Eskom. Now, while National Treasury appeared to do its best to stop or limit the rot at Eskom, its report on the Tegeta coal contracts is an example of that. There can be no doubt that more can and should have been done, particularly way back when we had the release of the Public Protector's State of Capture report. What did SARS, Treasury, Financial Intelligence Center do they could have done more to stop the billions leaving the country. And can these funds be recovered? Yes, they must. We already see the Asset Forfeiture Unit has obtained certain preservation orders. But we can't wait for the outcome of a commission of inquiry. We need to take steps now to bring those corrupt people back to South Africa, to face the law and to return those funds. 1 billion rand is what McKinsey said they'd return to South Africa. It has yet to be returned to us. And the sad part, just as Eskom as an example, is that it was allowed to be captured to the benefit, the interests of a few. And a once world-leading power producer will probably show a financial loss for this year. This coming off an asset base of 700 billion rand is disgraceful. Now, the ACDP welcomes the reduction of the 85 billion rand over the medium term, but it must flow from greater efficiencies in government and the reduction of corruption, rather than at the expense of service delivery. We also welcome measures to address the shortcomings of SARS and the 48 billion rand shortfall in tax that was collected. This is disgraceful.
You have 1 minute.
We share the committee's concern, as expressed in the committee's report, that the gravity of these issues are at stake, including the exodus of senior staff and how SARS managed various allegations against senior staff members and the SARS disbandment of the high-risk investigation unit, and KPMG's role in this must be addressed. That committee, that commission must sit, and we are grateful that at least Parliament is exercising oversight. But lastly, in the few seconds, let us have more of those types of inquiries, like the Eskom inquiry, like the SABC inquiry. Let us set time aside that we, as MPs, can go deep into what, as we exercise oversight. Let us do that because we are constrained to do that as we exercise our oversight. Thank you very much.
Honourable members, the next speech by the Honourable Ngwenya is her maiden speech.
Chairperson, honourable members, Treasury has legislative responsibilities regarding municipalities.
Members
These
must leave Gwen alone. It's a maiden
responsibilities
speech,
include
honourable
promote
member.
budget and fiscal management.
Honourable Chair,
and for this purpose,
it's a maiden
monitor the
speech.
implementation of municipal budgets, including their expenditure, revenue collection and borrowing, to monitor and assess compliance with the Municipal Finance Management Act, among others, as well as any applicable standards of generally recognized accounting practice.
Chairperson, sorry to interrupt. The disruptive ANC, this is the member's maiden speech. You've
Member,
raised it.
I haven't recognized you yet. Allow me to recognize you. Can I hear it?
Point of order, Honourable Chair. Thank you.
What point are you rising
Chairperson,
on?
You've made a statement that it's a member's maiden speech, but the members of the ANC continue to disrupt the member.
Now, honourable members, let us hear the Speaker, especially in a maiden speech. But quite frankly, honourable members, Honourable Ngwenya.
Yes. Treasury also has an investigative obligation. This investigative obligation includes making sure that any financial system in a municipality or municipal entity to investigate those and to ensure that there's compliance and to recommend improvements. And lastly, but not exhaustively, Treasury also must take appropriate steps where a municipality or municipal entity has committed a breach of its fiduciary duties. Treasury is regarded as the last bastion of institutional excellence in South Africa. However, the state of our municipalities reflects a department that is struggling to promote a culture of fiscal prudence and good practice. Of South Africa's 257 municipalities, 87 are labelled as distressed, 11 municipalities are under Section 139 interventions, meaning that they're under some form of administration. 112 municipalities have adopted unfunded budgets for the 2017-2018 financial year. This means that these municipalities will not be able to finance their expenditures by the end of the fiscal year in June. Despite the state of disarray, in a reply to the Democratic Alliance, the Minister indicated that only 14 municipalities have adopted financial recovery plans. 85% of the municipalities which are under distress or have adopted unfunded budgets are governed by the ANC. This illustrates a clear link between fiscal management and political leadership.
1 minute.
The root problems need to be addressed
Honourable
root
members,
problems
this is a maiden speech.
These root problems include weak
Right,
political
will you
leadership,
continue, Honourable
cadre
Ngweni?
deployment. There is a failure in these municipalities to employ the right people in the right jobs who have the requisite skills and experience to manage finances at the local government level, including also political dishonesty. ANC governments have a tendency to overpromise relative to the fiscal reality and therefore underdeliver inevitably. Our municipalities have sent out a fiscal distress signal. Mayday, mayday, mayday is the sound that rings across the country. They are begging to be rescued from the ANC. We must tell them that unless there's a change of leadership from the ANC to the DA, help will not be coming.
Umahlangu.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson, Honorable Minister, Honorable members, our guests, officials of the Treasury and SOEs. Good morning. Let me start by saying, as the African National Congress, we fully support the Budget Vote 7. Honorable Chair, in the year as we honor the greatest servants of our nation, Utata Nelson Mandela and Umama Albertina Sisulu, we are reminded of Madiba's words, and I open quote, "As long as many of our people still live in the poverty, as long as children still live under plastic covers, as long as many of our people are still without jobs, no South African should rest and wallow in the joy of freedom," close quote. The new dawn, Tumamina, is well aware that revenue collection is driven by the state of the economy, the fiscal policy choices that we make, and that administrative efficiency and tax morality determines taxpayers' compliance. The ANC, under the leadership of Honorable President Ramaphosa, has demonstrated its seriousness in addressing obstacles on tax administration, such as business and consumer confidence, tax morality, and credibility of the tax administration. He means business. We wish to congratulate SARS for good work, having collected a total of 1.2 billion rands for the financial year 2017-18, representing a growth of 6.3% from the year 2016-17 financial year. In the same spirit, we salute the 14,000 employees of SARS, the executive, the ordinary tax, hardworking South Africans for this revenue injection. There is a demonstration of our resilience as a nation to overcome obstacles, challenges, and our commitment to protect and deepen the democracy, because we fought so much for. Honorable Chairperson, ensuring efficient tax collected can never be overemphasized, as it is the pillar of our economy. 90% of our budget comes from the revenue collected by the South African revenue. This massive contribution forms the basis of our fiscal framework and a critical in consolidating our nation's sovereign debt, funding our social welfare, education, health, infrastructure development, job creation, and all other social services. The ANC is determined to restore and rebuild public trust and credibility with taxpayers, traders, our stakeholders, our partners, and fellow South Africans. It is therefore critical that all taxpayers and citizens always have full confidence that every cent provided to the fiscus will be spent and that they will all be treated with the highest level of service, with dignity, respect, and fairness. We therefore urge the President to speed up the establishment of Commission on SARS as soon as possible. Having said what I've said, Chairperson, this does not say we don't acknowledge and see and know that there are challenges within, but we are congratulating the workers and the South Africans. We acknowledge that significant measures are already being implemented to deal with challenges regarding tax collection. You have heard what the Minister has said and what the commitment has been done by our President. The ANC called on the Minister of Finance, Honorable Nene, to mitigate the impact of the VAT increase on the poor by increasing the zero-rated items. We therefore support the appointment of Professor Ingrid Woolmert by the Minister of Finance to lead this process, together with his prominent experts. Chairperson, allow me to say, it is not a mistake. We find ourselves as the ANC having to support because we understand the situation that the government has found itself in. Because it had no choice, it had to introduce the VAT as an option. But how do you think, and on the eve of the elections, we can take such a decision? We had no option. We had no option but to take this decision.
Honourable members, some of you are repeating the same thing, please.
What I also appreciate on what the Honourable Minister has said, he's not just talking for the sake of talking. He's committing and making a commitment. He has just said that the Walmart project has been given until June, and by June we expect a report as a committee. Furthermore, Honourable Chair, the ANC supports the decision to refer the rate and monetary amounts and amendments of revenue laws bills to NETLEC for more consultation and consensus. Because we are a party that listens, because we are the party that cares, we know and the issue of introducing VAT and trying to mitigate and intervene is affecting mostly the poor and the unemployed. Hence, we are saying we still need to engage further on the matter of VAT. The ANC commits itself in the centenary year of celebrating our icon, the father of the nation, that it shall do everything possible and beyond to address the challenge of poverty, unemployment, and inequality as a fulfillment of the Freedom Charter and inspired by Tata Madiba. And allow me, Chairperson, to quote him, I open quote, "Like slavery and apartheid, poverty is not natural. It is man-made, and it can be overcome and eradicated by the actions of human beings. And overcoming poverty is not a gesture of charity. It is an act of justice. It is the protection of a fundamental human right, the right to dignity and a decent life. While poverty persists, there is no true freedom." Close quote. We are saying as the ANC again, we support this budget vote 7, and we are saying we are committed to every single word that we have said in front of South Africa. And ke be ke kgopela Chairperson ka tumello ya gago gore go sana le ba o ka reng ba sa le marokong ba lora. Ke kgopela gore le modimo a ba thushe ba se ke be ba lora go fihla moo, because ba tla re botša tše di seng gona ba profita ba maaka. ba re bona ngwago tlang ba tla tšea pušo ne ba tseba gore ba ka se ke ba e re kga bjale honorable vessels, you were lost, my dear honorable member. You were talking about something else. But I'm going to leave that to the chairperson.
You have 1 minute.
I'm going to leave that to the chairperson to deal with it. And I'm saying to South Africans, we are rebuilding, we are committed, we are prepared. City to Manitina, we are going to work. Amandla.
Honorable Mbinda.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson of the session and honorable members of this House. As the PAC, we continue to argue the structural posture and outlook of our economic framework as the main cause of the challenges and shortages we continue to hear and discuss when we discuss our national treasury. It is our belief as the PAC that for as long as we continue to allow foreign corporates to come and exploit our means of production and pollute our market while taking the profits to the countries of origin, we will continue to shortfall to meet the demands of our people. As the PAC, we believe that we could afford for much more as a nation if the profits and our means of production are utilized for the development of our people. People continue to raise financial shortfalls every time our people call for genuine demands, such as free education, housing, and proper health care. And this is because we allow ourselves to be exploited as a nation. Chairperson, if we all have the political will to build, to take full control of our economy, we can afford free education and we can afford to build better hospitals, roads, and many more. We need to uproot the evil system, which is the colonial system. The total main budget spending of the 2018-19 appropriation bill was about 1.3 trillion, 27% of the total being allocated to current payments, 71% to transfer and subsidies, and 12% to servicing debts. And we need to understand that these are the debts that were never incurred by us, but by the then racist regime. Yeah, as the PAC, we continue to call for a review of the payment of the debt that was created deliberately by those that were in control, because it is making or delaying our self-determination trend. The billions and billions we used to pay this debt, it could have been invested somewhere else in developing our people. The National Treasury should play a vital role in returning the land and its resources to its rightful owners. It is not a departmental issue. It is a national issue. The same goes with corruption that steals billions of state money. We call on tighter measures to be put in place to secure state resources from the thieves that are dominating our government resources. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Honorable Mbinda.
With the appointment, don't give instructions. With the appointment of you, Honorable Nene, because we are giving you a benefit of doubt, we support, not, I know it's here. We support, sorry, former Minister of Police. We support the bill.
Thank Order, thank you, Honorable Mbinda. I see Swafana Bonene Bonke, any nene works. Thank you very much. Honorable Godi is not here. I'll now call Honorable Mazamba.
Madam Chair, I belong to South Africa, here we go. Madam Chair, the vision for South Africa as a caring society which cares for all its people is one which I believe is shared by all of us in this room today. Minister Nana, we welcome your comments to limit the government exposure at SOEs and the recapture of those SOEs. But I'm afraid after your speech, I'm not any wiser as to the details of how that is to be done. But whatever you do, we will support you to achieve that outcome. What baffles me is why the ANC dogmatically clings to the SAA vanity project, which has siphoned off and will continue to siphon off billions of rand from poor South Africans to subsidize the rich. Over the last 6 years, SAA has lost a staggering 21.4 billion rand. This is enough money to increase the child grant to 450 rand per month, to build 612 schools, to fund 3-year bursaries for 88,600 undergraduate students. And so the list of missed opportunities goes on. In the 2018 financial year, 10 billion rand in taxpayer bailouts were paid to SAA, and despite this, before the end of the 2018 financial year, SAA had run out of cash and was approaching banks for a further bridging loan. Banks apparently refused to lend any money to SAA, even on the back of government guarantees. In what seems to have been a desperate move, we hear that a commitment letter from National Treasury was conjured up and was somehow used by SAA to persuade banks to provide 5 billion rand in bridging finance. This appears to be a guarantee of the guarantees already given to SAA. Was this commitment letter a scheme to avoid using Section 16 of the PFMA to pay SAA unbudgeted funding for the third time in 10 months? Was this commitment letter even lawful? The contents of this commitment letter remain a mystery, except that the SAA CEO informed the media that the letter included a National Treasury commitment to inject capital into SAA. There's no provision, as Honourable Tobias said earlier, to provide capital for SAA included in the budget we debate here today. So where is this capital injection to come from? Minister Nane, I have no doubt that fixing SAA is very high on your priority list.
You have 1 minute.
Does this commitment letter exist, and were you consulted in advance about it? If it exists, what are the contents of this letter? Did you sign the letter? Was the letter approved by Cabinet? Minister Nana, as has been said by several speakers this morning, you have a reputation of doing the right thing. We await urgent answers to these questions. South Africans are counting on you to stop the bailouts to SAA. Ngqongqoshe, sithemba ukuthi ngeke uphinde uvume ukuthi SAA inikezwe enye imali yabantu bethu. Ngiyabonga.
Sibonge Mhlonishwa Mazambane. Bite ilunga lihloniphekile Karim. You have 8 minutes.
Chairperson, comrades and colleagues, now we are told today that we are rubber stamping the fiscal framework and the budget. Now I refer you to the reports we write. In this very year, we've said that we do not unconditionally approve, Minister, wherever you are, the VAT increase of 1%. At most, what we said, Minister, was that maybe it's justified if enough zero-rated and other pro-poor provisions are allowed for within a 2-year framework. We only said it's reasonable. So there's the test. In fact, we brought forward the public hearings on the VAT bill, as we call it. We, in fact, have told the minister that he must expand, based on the NGO submission, the panel and expand their terms of reference, and we wait to hear from him. And in fact, if he doesn't within 7 days, I'll have to write to him on behalf of the committee. Now, secondly, we are told by the DA, by Mr. Mania, about fiscal responsibility. Now, what about responsibility to the poor and the disadvantaged? What about responsibility on service delivery and development? Why, indeed, are we going back to neoliberalism? Why are we going back to a discredited approach? We, of course, as the ANC, support fiscal responsibility, provided it is responsibility to the poor and the disadvantaged, provided it advances the national democratic struggle, provided it's consistent with the RDP, the New Growth Part, and other policies. So let us not go back to neoliberalism, please. Where is the progressive liberalism of Colin Eglin, I keep asking? Where's that? Which we can entertain, which we can engage with. And indeed, Mr. Mania knows also well, we are amending the Money Bills Act as the first of a two-tranche process. In fact, we're voting on it next week. It'll be in the House when we get back in August, and then we're going to engage further on amending the Money Bills Act. So, on fiscal responsibility, yes, provided it's not at the expense of the poor and the disadvantaged. Then very quickly, the conceptual confusion and outcomes delusion of Mr. Floyd Shivambu, Comrade Floyd Shivambu. Let's start with the conceptual confusion. There is no inconsistency, Minister, as no doubt you will say. There is no inconsistency between saying that you do not want to increase corporate income tax and on the other hand saying go for illicit financial flows, and now, Mr. Shivambu, Comrade Shivambu, illicit tobacco trade. We are clear, Minister, we don't buy what SARS is offering us. We feel you must do more. Last week, your colleague, Comrade Praveen, said 100 billion is gone. No, we want that money back. It belongs to this country. And quite frankly, Minister, we have written to you and your predecessor, and we want a reply within 14 days. Look at our report. Look at section 5.9 or whatever it is on our report. Look at section whatever it is. It's on page whatever, right? Okay, right? You'll find it. It's very clear there. Tandi, you were here. I wasn't here. We did this in 5.8, 5.9. We are very clear. We are very, very clear. We want the money that belongs to the people. Minister, that money doesn't belong to you. It doesn't belong to SARS. We do not accept, Minister. We cannot prescribe to the president on interministerial task teams. I was there, I know. But we've asked you to do it last time. Not you, sorry, your predecessor. Now, whatever your predecessor didn't do, you have to do. So we are saying to you, within 14 days, we want an answer from you. What have you done to set up an or propose to the president an interministerial task team on illicit financial flows and illicit tobacco trade? We want that. We want more coordination and cohesion. Tomorrow, we're going to hold the SARS here before us. And comrades, let's abide by decisions we take. The SARS must answer to us, what have they been doing? Mr. Kingon is here, the commissioner. We want you to deliver. Right? We may not be here, some of us like me, next year this time, but others will ensure that this gets done. On illicit financial flows, no compromise whatsoever, right? On illicit tobaccos, no compromise. Now, let's come to Mr. Comrade Floyd Shivambu, right? There's a very simple delusion he has. Comrade Floyd, you know, that in order to have a government policy, in order to be in government, you have to win an election. Now, you have a slight problem there, Comrade Floyd. You've got 6 to 8% at the moment. And you seem to be crumbling because you're saying the same things you've said all along. And by the way, why are you taking ANC policies and making it yours? You know full well we decided when you were in the ANC itself that we will have a state-owned bank. You know, my brother. You know, my brother. You know. We have already said, Floyd, you have a wonderful researcher. You know full well that in December 2017, we took yet another decision to ensure that SARB is in national hands. The
Honorable Karim.
Private sorry, yes?
Yeah, please wait a minute.
My brother.
Just keep on standing.
Don't be a Bongi, right, for the...
Honorable Njoman.
I don't know where to sit, so I'll stand.
Thank you. The Bolsheviks dislodged Mensheviks. Hence, EFF will definitely become a government.
What point? Honorable
Floyd.
Honorable Shivambu.
What's the point of order?
Chairperson, look, there is nothing wrong with the chairperson of the committee debating. So the policies
point,
which we are
Honorable
legislating on are in the
Shibambo?
founding manifesto of the EFF adopted in 2013. We only took resolutions now in 2017.
Honorable Shibambo.
So you must admit that, don't mislead this process. You must be honest at least in terms of what we're talking about.
Right.
Don't
Okay.
speak confusion.
Honorable Shibambu, please
Right.
take your seat.
Can I continue, Chairman?
Please continue, Honorable Karim.
Now let's go to something else. He knows full well, Floyd does, Mr. Comrade Shivambu, that actually we have a post-bank bill coming up, right? And we've written a report on financial sector transformation, which he adopted and they opposed, and you are very good there, let's add, right? No, there is no ideological. Now, you talk about our collective incapacity, Comrade Floyd. You have a collective incapacity to increase your vote. Let's start with that, right? Before our collective incapacity. Now, my friend there from the IFP, who's normally sedate and moderate, and Mr. Lees, on SAA, let's be clear. We agree to private participation, but no to privatization. SAA has commercial viability possibilities while serving a national developmental task. We will not give up on SAA. And the EFF won't agree either, so they'll be on the same page. On private sector participation, yes. On private equity participation, yes. On privatization, no. And by the way, last week there was, unfortunately, as the chairperson said, she acted in good faith. Can I clarify something about this? Comrade Tandi, you acted in good faith last week.
You have 1 minute.
Correct information before the meeting when the decision was taken to close. We have agreed that we can only close parts of a meeting in terms of the rules. And the ANC has no intention of undermining the very rules that we've passed. Minister, can make something clear. When the acting chairperson was saying we'll pass the bills, she's referring to the bills before us, the tax administration bill, the tax laws administration bill, the post-bank bill, as we told you, and a bill, his private member's bill, and so on. But no more, Levy's bill. We've spoken to you on behalf of the committee, spoken to the leader of government business. This thing, Comrade Chair, can I raise this thing, which we've been raising for a long time? Our legislative program is too executive-driven. Parliament is the tribune of the people. It's not for the executive to decide. They can come with their program, but they cannot decide for us as Parliament. Not in terms of the NDR and our vision of a people's power Parliament. Why do we allow the executive to dictate to us which bill should come first? We are telling the minister, you must actually bring bills that only we recognize as urgent. Minister, with due respect to you, you were a former chair of this committee. Do you really expect that before April 2019, we are going to process another 8 extra bills? We have contacted you, we've contacted the leader of government business, the president's office, the chief whip of the majority party, and still they're insisting on all these bills. You are a senior member of the executive. Do something. Thank you very much.
I told the TA we were going to win the debate. We have won the debate.
Please take your seat. Thank you, Honorable Karim. And Lungalson Pegile Ngongosh. We take mad.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Honorable Chair. I've actually been verbally abused by the chairperson of the committee. And we are actually on the same page. The legislation before Parliament is the legislation that is there by mutual agreement between the committee and the executive. And we will continue to work. Some of these things we will take offline. Chair, thank you very much for the comments and the contributions that have been made. And I thank members for some very valuable inputs that they have made. One of the things that come out of Honorable Mainier's input is that government has allowed debt to rise to unsustainable levels. Fact of the matter is that it was through Parliament that we agreed that during the global financial crisis, our response is going to be premised on counter-cyclical fiscal policy, which meant that by agreement, we will allow debt to increase to the level, and up to this point, we have actually managed that very responsibly. And I don't agree that Parliament has actually been rubber-stamping the fiscal framework. Parliament has engaged robustly with the fiscal framework. I'm afraid it is a serious indictment to Parliament that there was not robust engagement. Indeed, this does represent some form of the fiscal responsibility that you are alluding to. But let us engage on the matter, and we are quite happy to engage on this matter, and Parliament must give itself time to debate the issue of the fiscal responsibility rule. Well, of course, Honorable Shivambu, as the old adage goes, that theory without practice is sterile, and practice without theory is indeed blind. We now know what your formula is of winning elections. You actually just get into bed with the DA and try and see if you can't be in on the governing seats. But the fact of the matter is that the points you raise with regards to the banks, and even though we have the land bank, you still insist on having an agricultural development bank. I actually don't understand, unless in the committee you are able to advise as to how best the land bank should actually execute its functions. I think we are just overstretching and grandstanding on this matter. The private ownership of the Reserve Bank, and as Honorable Karim has also pointed out, I think it serves you better, and the opposition bench, is not to spend time developing policy. Just wait until policy has been developed by the ANC, and then you take it and run with it as if it was your own. That borders on being very opportunistic, I would want to say. It's actually, he says it's plagiarism. Yes, thank you. Actually, I think we should introduce something of that. Of course, you make some very interesting points, one regarding the Sovereign Wealth Fund, and you know, sovereign wealth funds are normally established out of surplus funds, and it would be interesting to see a country that has the debt levels that we have, calling debt a surplus would actually be indeed the most reckless thing for us to do, but I think we should engage on all of these things. And converting PIC debt in SOEs also into equity, an interesting point indeed. Let's have a debate on that one. Well, Honorable Hlengwa, you speak about brain drain and Treasury being compromised. Indeed, the institution actually is standing on its feet, and we're working very hard at some of those areas. But what has happened also with the Treasury is that we've produced the skills that actually would actually be very mobile and versatile. It is for that reason that the Treasury is able to, across departments, we are able to transfer skills, but also even into the private sector and elsewhere in the world. And that is what the Treasury has been doing. And we have a very simple principle. Whoever leaves the Treasury will leave the door open. And we've seen a number of people actually taking advantage of that. Indeed, the issue of VAT, Babu Kwankwa, and that we do need to grow the economy. Oh, he's no longer in the House, but at the end of the day, so, I'm sorry. Yes, of course, the issue of corporate taxes, indeed, when Parliament debates these things, we actually need to be sober about what it is that would actually be in the best interest of the broader South Africa without necessarily placing each other in different compartments. The expansion, you see the action that we are taking, if you say that we should have taken this action prior to the implementation of VAT, you cannot take that action before VAT has been implemented. But once it's implemented, in the first place, this is not a new thing. They are already zero-rated items. What we are saying, in order to mitigate the impact, we need to expand it. And it's for that reason we're taking a responsible step that says, put this in front of a committee, allow inputs to, to be processed, and it is after that that we will take an informed decision. And of course, should the economy turn around and produce better revenues, there would be no reason. In fact, we can even scrap the taxes if there is any other form of bringing money into the state other than taxing. It's a matter of wanting to go to heaven and not wanting to die. Of course, Mr. Wessels talks about corruption, and I think Sheikh Imam was very correct in saying that if we want to know how we got here, we got our liberation and transparency kicked in, and we put in place a legislative framework that actually exposes and deals with all of these malfeasances. That was never the case in the past. It is on the basis of our PFMA that we deal with these issues. It is on the basis of all our legislation that we deal with these things. On illicit flows, again, I thought I was trying to look at the director of the Financial Intelligence Center, but also with SARS, that South Africa is a signatory to the automatic exchange of information. All of those measures have been taken because South Africa, all of these flows flow into various jurisdictions. The important step to take is therefore then to take advantage and make use of such instruments as the automatic exchange of information and becoming members also of such structures that we are then better able to get into those countries and be able to recover what the country has lost. So indeed, as the Director General indicated, that we are not a failed state, but it is up to this collective in this room here today and what we do also as individuals that we prevent our country from being a failed state. It is when we all take our responsibilities seriously and stop grandstanding on issues that are actually bread and butter issues that relate to the lives of our people. Indeed, we will speed up the establishment of the commission, as I said in my input, that the President, Honorable Mahlangu, that the President is in the process of finalizing the establishment of the commission, and quite soon, I just cannot give the dates, but quite soon the commission will be operational. And everything has been put in place. It is at a very advanced stage. But all of these things are approached with the care and due diligence that they require. Mazambane, the details of the letter. You know, a letter of commitment, and you know, we have a process of processing guarantees. The letter we are referring to is not a guarantee. And I think it is for that reason that perhaps there was misunderstanding in the committee, because when we sit down and discuss some of these sensitive matters, and then we go out in the public domain and create an environment where it becomes difficult for some of our state-owned entities to be able to play in a competitive environment where there are other competitors, and some of the information is not the information, but as a member of the committee, indeed, you are entitled to it, and we are quite happy to share that with you and to get you to understand exactly how these things are done. And as the chair also has indicated, that with state-owned companies, there now is the private sector participation framework that is in place. It is intended to make sure that those state-owned entities are able to attract private investment, but cannot be privatized for reasons, as this House will agree also, that some of these entities we are talking about have an element of a developmental mandate that they need to execute. Therefore, Chair, the Chair of the committee has called on the establishment of the IMC on illicit flows, and I think we take the matter quite seriously. It's a matter that we should follow due processes and see how best that can be implemented at executive level. But once again, I want to take this opportunity to thank all members and for who have given the support to the budget vote of the National Treasury, and I make an undertaking here that we will do everything humanly possible to make sure that we indeed recapture what has been lost of the state and bring it back. And you are the custodians of that. National Treasury is just the implementer. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Honorable members, this was one of the 3 mini plenaries that was sitting today and bringing the end to the process of mini plenaries. From this afternoon, at 14 hours, we are reminded that the House plenary to debate the Parliament's budget vote 2 will take place at the National Assembly chamber. And so that concludes the debate and business of this mini plenary session. The mini plenary will now rise. Thank you.
Members of the Standing Committee on Finance, can you please remain behind? We have to vote on 2 resolutions. Members of the Standing Committee on Finance.